The crowd fell silent as Max, the German Shepherd K9 officer, suddenly froze mid-command. His handler's sharp whistle pierced the air again, but Max's ears remained locked forward, his body tense with defiance. Spectators gasped as the highly trained police dog broke rank, abandoning years of disciplined conditioning in a heartbeat. At the edge of the demonstration area, 6-year-old Tommy Wilson gripped his wheelchair armrests, his small face a picture of wonder as the magnificent animal moved with purpose, straight toward him. Officer Carter's commanding voice echoed across the park. "Max, halt." But something more powerful than training had taken over. In those few seconds, as the distance closed between boy and dog, rules were shattering, careers were hanging in the balance, and no one could have predicted the chain of events this single act of defiance would set in motion. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Tommy Wilson wasn't always in a wheelchair. Until his 5th birthday, he'd been a blur of motion, climbing, running, and jumping with the boundless energy that defined childhood. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything, a rare degenerative condition affecting his spinal cord. Now at 6 years old, his world had shrunk to the dimensions of his wheelchair. But his spirit remained undiminished. With sandy blonde hair that refused to stay combed and bright blue eyes that missed nothing, Tommy possessed a resilience that stunned even the specialists at Mayo Clinic who managed his care. His most steadfast companion was Scout, a 2-year-old German Shepherd mix, specially trained to alert to Tommy's seizures before they happened and provide the emotional support that medication couldn't deliver. Tommy's father had died, serving as a police officer when Tommy was just 3, leaving his mother Sarah to navigate the medical bills, appointments, and heartbreak alone. Officer James Carter had spent 17 years on the force, the last 8 exclusively with the K9 unit. At 46, his close-cropped hair was showing more salt than pepper, and the lines around his eyes had deepened from squinting into the sun at countless demonstrations and operations. His partner, Max, was considered the department's elite asset, a 5-year-old German Shepherd with a flawless record in narcotics detection, suspect apprehension, and public demonstrations. Their bond was legendary within the precinct. They moved as a single unit, connected by invisible threads of trust and countless hours of training. Officer Carter was known for his unbending adherence to protocol and precision, a reputation earned through years of perfect evaluations and textbook operations. What few knew was that beneath his professional exterior lay the still raw grief of losing his younger brother to the same condition now claiming Tommy Wilson's mobility. Central Park buzzed with anticipation that Saturday morning. The annual NYPD Community Day had drawn hundreds of families eager to see the various demonstrations. The K9 Showcase was always the highlight, a carefully choreographed exhibition of obedience, agility, and crime-fighting skills. Blue canopies dotted the great lawn, housing information booths and recruitment stations. Children clutched plastic junior officer badges while parents checked program schedules. The atmosphere was festive, but orderly, with uniformed officers strategically positioned to maintain crowd control and answer questions. For Tommy Wilson, who'd begged his mother to bring him after seeing a poster at his doctor's office, this wasn't just entertainment, it was perhaps his last chance to fulfill his dream of meeting a real police dog, like the one his father had worked alongside. Tommy had circled the date on his calendar with a red marker 6 weeks ago. Police Dog Day, he'd written in his careful first-grade handwriting, the letters slightly crooked, but perfectly legible. Ever since Dr. Morgan had sat his mother down for the talk, the one where words like progressive and limited time hung in the air like storm clouds, Tommy had become obsessed with fulfilling his modest bucket list. Meeting a police K9 unit topped that list, a dream born from the stories Sarah told him about his father's partner, a Belgian Malinois named Rex, who had attended David Wilson's funeral and howled during the playing of taps. Tommy kept a framed photograph of his dad and Rex beside his bed, and on his hardest days, when the pain medication made him drowsy and disoriented, he would clutch it and whisper questions to the smiling officer in the picture. "Do you think he'll come to me, Mom?" Tommy asked as Sarah navigated their aging Honda through Manhattan traffic that morning. Max, the brochure says he's the best canine in the whole department. Scout sat dutifully in the back seat, his service vest neatly fastened, occasionally licking Tommy's cheek when the boy turned to check on him. Honey, these dogs are working dogs. They have very strict rules about who can approach them and when, Sarah explained gently, her eyes flicking between the road and the rear-view mirror, where she could see her son's expression fall slightly. But Officer Carter might let you say hello after the demonstration if we ask nicely. She wouldn't promise more than that. The succession of disappointments over the past year had taught her caution. What she didn't tell Tommy was how much this trip had cost them. The specialized van rental with wheelchair access had eaten up nearly 2 months of savings from her night shift at the hospital. The hotel room, necessary because Tommy couldn't handle the return trip on the same day, had required her to sell her mother's silver tea service. Every penny from David's police pension went to Tommy's treatments, and Sarah had long since stopped counting the collection notices that arrived weekly. But when Dr. Morgan had pulled her aside during Tommy's last appointment and murmured, "Make memories now," Sarah had made her decision. Whatever the cost, her son would have this day. By the time they arrived at Central Park, the demonstration area was already crowded. Sarah pushed Tommy's wheelchair with determination, Scout padding alongside them, but each promising viewpoint seemed blocked by standing spectators. "I can't see anything, Mom," Tommy said, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice as he strained to peer between the forest of legs. Sarah knelt beside his wheelchair. "Let me try to find an official, sweetie. Maybe they have a special area for wheelchairs." She spotted a uniformed officer nearby and approached him, explaining their situation. The officer's face softened when she mentioned that Tommy's father had been Officer David Wilson from the 34th Precinct. "Wilson's boy? Follow me, ma'am," he said, leading them through the crowd to a roped-off section near the front. "David pulled my rookie behind out of a burning car back in 15. This spot's reserved for department families." He lifted the rope to allow Sarah to wheel Tommy through, positioning them perfectly at the edge of the demonstration area. Tommy's face lit up with a smile so radiant it momentarily masked the pallor of his skin. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the officer, blinking back tears. Their perfect view lasted precisely 11 minutes before Michael Reynolds arrived. He wore an expensive camera around his neck like a talisman, using its bulk to push through the crowd with an entitled air. "Press," he announced loudly, though no credential hung from his neck. "Need to get some shots. You'll have to move." He directed this at Sarah, barely glancing at Tommy. "I'm sorry, but this area is reserved for families of police officers," Sarah replied, her voice firm but polite. "There's a press section over there." She pointed to a designated area where several photographers stood with tripods. Michael snorted. "That's too far back for what I need. Look, lady, I've got a deadline. Just roll the kid back a few feet." He made a shooing motion with his hand. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "My son can't see from further back. Please respect the designated areas." Tommy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "It's okay, Mom. I don't want to cause trouble." But Michael had already shouldered his way past them, positioning himself directly in front of Tommy's wheelchair. Scout growled softly, sensing Sarah's tension, but remained in his trained position beside Tommy's chair. "Sir," the officer who had helped them began, approaching with a frown, "you'll need to move to the press area." "I paid my taxes for this park just like everyone else," Michael interrupted. "First Amendment rights. I'm covering this for my blog." He raised his camera and began snapping photos, his elbow occasionally bumping against Tommy's wheelchair. The officer looked like he might argue further, but a crackle from his radio pulled him away to deal with another situation. Sarah stood protectively beside Tommy, her hands gripping the wheelchair handles so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Mom, I still can't see," Tommy whispered, his lower lip trembling slightly. As the demonstration began and the crowd cheered the arrival of the K9 units, Michael's behavior worsened. He shifted constantly, blocking Tommy's view each time Sarah tried to reposition the wheelchair. When Max and Officer Carter took center stage, performing an impressive series of obedience exercises, Michael's running commentary became increasingly disruptive. "Overrated," he muttered loudly. "My cousin's retriever could do better tricks than that. What a waste of taxpayer money." Tommy's eyes filled with tears as he strained to catch glimpses of the magnificent German Shepherd leaping barriers and responding instantly to his handler's commands. Scout sensed his distress, pressing his body closer to the wheelchair. "Please," Sarah finally said, her patience exhausted. "My son is very ill. This demonstration means everything to him. Could you please just let him watch?" Michael turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in Tommy's pale face and the service dog beside him. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across his features, quickly replaced by hardened indifference. "Everybody's got problems, lady," he said coldly. "Maybe you should have come earlier if you wanted a better spot." He raised his camera again, deliberately stepping backward until the rear wheel of Tommy's chair was pressed against the barricade, leaving the boy completely unable to see the demonstration. Scout's growl deepened, and Tommy placed a calming hand on his dog's head. "It's okay, boy," he whispered, though his voice broke. "We can watch the videos online later." But the devastation in his eyes told a different story. One more disappointment in a life that had seen too many. Michael Reynolds' antagonism escalated beyond mere inconsideration. As Officer Carter directed Max through a complex series of detection exercises, Michael began taking flash photographs directly in the dog's line of sight. A collective murmur of disapproval rippled through the crowd as Max momentarily faltered in his routine, causing Officer Carter to throw a sharp glance toward the source of the disruption. Michael ignored the reactions, continuing to reposition himself wherever he could most effectively block Tommy's view. When Sarah attempted to wheel Tommy to a different angle, Michael deliberately stepped sideways, his camera bag swinging against the armrest of Tommy's wheelchair. "Sir, please be careful," Sarah said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You nearly hit my son." "Public space," Michael replied dismissively. "Not my problem if you can't handle a crowd." He raised his camera again, his elbow jutting backward until it made contact with Tommy's shoulder. The boy winced, but remained silent, his small hands twisting anxiously in his lap. Scout's posture changed immediately. The service dog's ears flattened against his head, and a low warning growl emanated from his throat. Despite his protective instinct, Scout remained in his trained position beside Tommy's wheelchair, demonstrating the remarkable discipline that had made him such an effective service animal. "Control your dog," Michael snapped, momentarily lowering his camera. "He should be muzzled in public." Tommy placed a reassuring hand on Scout's head. "He's just doing his job," the boy said quietly. "He doesn't like when people are mean." Michael's face darkened. "Listen, kid," he began, but his words were cut short by a mother with a stroller who had been watching the exchange. "Leave them alone," she interjected. "Can't you see the boy is disabled? And that's a certified service dog. They have every right to be here without being harassed." Rather than backing down, Michael seemed energized by the confrontation. "Oh, so now everyone gets special treatment? I've got a job to do too." He turned back to Tommy, his voice lowering to a mocking whisper. "The world doesn't stop spinning just because you're in a wheelchair, kid." Tommy's face crumpled, though he fought to maintain composure. Sarah's hands trembled with rage as she stepped between her son and Michael. "That's enough," she said firmly. "I'm getting security." As Sarah turned to locate an officer, Michael did something unthinkable. He reached down and deliberately pushed Scout's service vest, causing the dog to shift position. "Some service dog," he scoffed. "Doesn't even stay put." The action was the final provocation. Scout barked sharply, a sound so unusual from the normally silent service dog that Tommy looked startled. Several nearby spectators turned toward the commotion, including a woman who immediately began recording with her phone. "Did you just touch a service animal?" she called out loudly. "That's illegal." Michael spun toward her. "Mind your own business. I barely touched it. These people are taking up space meant for everyone." The confrontation was escalating precisely as Officer Carter and Max reached the most complex portion of their demonstration. A simulated drug detection scenario that required Max's complete focus and Carter's undivided attention. The German Shepherd moved methodically between several containers arranged in the demonstration area, his nose working efficiently as he sought the training scent hidden within one of them. Officer Carter maintained his professional demeanor, but his peripheral awareness noted the growing disturbance at the edge of the performance space. Years of police work had honed his ability to monitor multiple situations simultaneously. Through the corner of his eye, he registered the wheelchair, the service dog, and the aggressive stance of a man wielding a camera. Something about the dynamic troubled him deeply. But protocol demanded he complete the demonstration without deviation. Max, however, was experiencing a different kind of conflict. His training had made him exquisitely sensitive to environmental changes, and despite his focus on the detection task, his ears swiveled periodically toward the disturbance. When Scout barked, Max's head lifted momentarily, nostrils flaring as he processed the other dog's distress signal. Officer Carter issued a quiet command to refocus his partner, and Max reluctantly returned to the detection exercise, identifying the correct container with textbook precision. The crowd applauded enthusiastically as Officer Carter rewarded Max with his favorite tug toy, but the seasoned canine officer could sense his partner's divided attention. Max's body language had shifted subtly, his tail positioned slightly higher, his movements more alert and evaluative. Carter recognized the change immediately. It was Max's assessment posture, the bearing he adopted when scanning an environment for potential threats. Meanwhile, the situation with Michael had deteriorated further. Emboldened by the attention, he had begun a running commentary designed to disrupt the event. "This is all for show," he announced loudly to anyone who would listen. "These dogs aren't half as effective as they claim. It's taxpayer money down the drain." When several people shushed him, Michael grew more belligerent. He turned back to Tommy and deliberately moved his camera bag onto the boy's lap. "Hold this for a minute, will you? I need to change lenses." The weight of the heavy bag caused Tommy to gasp in pain. His condition made pressure on his legs excruciating, and tears sprang immediately to his eyes. Scout barked again, more urgently this time, causing several heads to turn in their direction, including Max's. Sarah returned at that moment, a security officer in tow, and her face contorted with anger when she saw her son's distress. "Get your bag off my child," she shouted, rushing forward to remove the offending item. "He's in pain." Michael snatched his bag back with exaggerated force. "Don't touch my equipment, it's worth more than that chair of his." The security officer stepped between them. "Sir, I need you to move to the designated press area or leave the event." "On what grounds?" Michael challenged, his voice rising. "I have every right to be here. Freedom of the press." "On the grounds of harassment and interfering with a service animal," the officer replied firmly. "Now move along." As the confrontation intensified, Officer Carter was completing the final sequence of the demonstration. Max had performed flawlessly, despite his obvious awareness of the disturbance. Carter gave the standard closing speech about canine capabilities and public safety, his voice carrying clearly across the demonstration area. He concluded with the traditional caution to the audience. "Remember, our canine officers are working dogs with specialized training. They should never be approached or touched without handler permission. Max is trained to protect and serve, and while he may look friendly, he is always on duty." Thank you for your attention today. Are there any questions? Several hands rose, but before Carter could acknowledge them, a sharp cry of pain cut through the murmur of the crowd. Tommy had attempted to adjust his position in the wheelchair, and Michael, refusing to yield ground, had stepped backward onto the boy's foot. The crushing weight against his already sensitive extremities caused Tommy to cry out involuntarily, a sound of such genuine distress that it cut through all other noise like a knife. What happened next occurred so rapidly that later accounts from witnesses varied considerably. Max, still at Officer Carter's side, suddenly stiffened. His ears rotated forward, his entire body reorienting toward the source of distress. Officer Carter, sensing the change, immediately issued the command to hold position. "Max, stay," he ordered firmly, his voice carrying the authority of countless training sessions. For the first time in their partnership, Max hesitated. His eyes locked with his handlers, a moment of communication that transcended training. Then, in an unprecedented breach of protocol, the German Shepherd broke formation. He didn't run or bark. Instead, he moved with deliberate purpose, weaving through the stunned crowd with fluid precision, his focus unwavering. Officer Carter's voice rang out again, more urgent this time. "Max, halt!" The command echoed across the suddenly silent park. Parents pulled children closer, cameras raised to capture the unexpected deviation, and security personnel tensed, uncertain how to respond to a potential canine incident. Max ignored the command completely, something he had never done in his 5 years of service. His trajectory was clear and unwavering, straight toward Tommy Wilson's wheelchair. Scout, recognizing another working dog's approach, remained alert but non-confrontational, his body slightly forward in protection mode but not aggressive. Michael, unnerved by the approaching police dog, finally stepped away from Tommy's wheelchair. "Control your animal, officer," he shouted, his earlier bravado dissolving into evident fear. Officer Carter moved quickly through the crowd, following his partner with a mixture of professional concern and bewilderment. In 8 years of partnership, Max had never once broken training. The dog's behavior was so out of character that Carter's mind raced through potential explanations. Had Max detected contraband? A threat? Was something medically wrong with the animal? The crowd parted instinctively, creating a clear path between the demonstration area and Tommy's wheelchair. Time seemed to slow as Max closed the final distance, his powerful body moving with the controlled grace that made German Shepherds legendary in police work. Tommy's expression transformed from pain to wonder as the magnificent animal approached him. He had idolized police dogs since understanding his father's connection to them, had plastered his bedroom walls with canine unit posters, had insisted on reading every book about working dogs the children's hospital library contained. And now, inexplicably, one of the department's most decorated canine officers was approaching him directly. Max stopped precisely 1 foot from Tommy's wheelchair. Officer Carter arrived seconds later, breathless and ready to recall his partner, but something in the tableau before him made him pause. Max wasn't exhibiting aggression or alerting to a threat. Instead, the dog's posture had softened, his head slightly lowered to meet Tommy at eye level. It was a posture Carter had never witnessed from his working partner, a gentle, almost deliberate adjustment to accommodate the boy's seated position. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. Then, with the careful deliberation that characterized his professional performance, Max placed his paw precisely on the armrest of Tommy's wheelchair. The silence that enveloped the scene lasted only moments before being broken by Tommy's soft gasp of wonder. Max maintained his position, paw resting gently on the wheelchair's armrest, his intelligent eyes fixed on the boy's face, with an intensity that suggested communication beyond human understanding. Officer Carter stood frozen, torn between protocol and the extraordinary tableau unfolding before him. His training demanded immediate correction of Max's unprecedented behavior, yet something deeper, a human instinct that transcended police procedure, held him back. "Max," he finally said, his voice softer than his usual commanding tone. The German Shepherd's ears twitched in acknowledgement, but the dog remained steadfast in his position beside Tommy's wheelchair. Scout, sensing no threat from the larger dog, had relaxed his protective stance and now sat calmly beside his young master, occasionally glancing between Max and Tommy as if monitoring their silent exchange. Tommy's small hand slowly, tentatively reached toward Max's head. Officer Carter tensed instinctively. Police canines were not petting dogs, and Max had been conditioned to allow contact only from Carter and the veterinary staff. Physical interaction with civilians, especially children, was explicitly prohibited by department regulations. Yet as Tommy's fingers hovered inches from Max's fur, Carter found himself unable to issue the correction command. "May I?" Tommy asked, looking up at Officer Carter with such naked hope that the veteran canine handler felt something shift inside his chest, a professional barrier cracking under the weight of compassion. Before Carter could respond, Max made the decision for him. The German Shepherd leaned forward slightly, bringing his head directly under Tommy's waiting hand. The boy's fingers sank into the thick fur, and his face transformed with pure joy. "He's so soft," Tommy whispered, as if sharing a precious secret. "Just like I imagined." Officer Carter knelt beside his partner, close enough to intervene if necessary but maintaining a respectful distance from Tommy. "I've never seen him do this before," he admitted, professional assessment momentarily overriding protocol concerns. "Max doesn't approach civilians unless commanded." Sarah Wilson stood nearby, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "My husband was Officer David Wilson," she explained quietly. "Canine Unit, 34th Precinct. He always said these dogs could sense things we couldn't." Recognition flickered across Carter's face. "David Wilson? I knew him. We completed tactical training together back in 15. He hadn't made the connection until this moment, but now the pieces fell into place. "Your husband was an exceptional officer. The department lost one of its finest." He studied Tommy with renewed understanding. "And this is his son." The intimate moment was shattered by Michael Reynolds, who had recovered from his initial intimidation and now pushed forward again, camera raised. "This is gold," he declared, firing off a series of rapid shots. "Canine breaks training to comfort sick kid. My followers will eat this up." Max's demeanor shifted instantly. Without moving from Tommy's side, his body tensed, head turning toward Michael with a low, warning rumble emanating from deep in his chest. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. The gentle presence that had approached Tommy had been replaced by the protective police dog, positioning himself between a perceived threat and a vulnerable civilian. Officer Carter recognized the protective stance immediately. It was part of Max's core training, the positioning of body and weight in preparation to defend. Yet Max had initiated this response without command, making an independent assessment that Michael represented a threat to Tommy. The implications were professionally troubling but personally affecting. Somehow, in the space of moments, Max had categorized Tommy as someone to be protected. "Sir, I need you to lower your camera and step back," Carter said, reverting to his authoritative police tone. "You're agitating my partner." Michael sneered, though he did take a half step backward. "It's a public event. I have every right to document it." "You have no right to harass a disabled child or interfere with a service animal," Sarah interjected, finding courage in the protective presence of both dogs. Several onlookers murmured agreement, smartphones capturing the confrontation from multiple angles. The crowd around them had grown, the demonstration temporarily forgotten as viewers pressed closer to witness the unusual interaction between the police dog and the boy in the wheelchair. Opinions rippled through the gathering, some expressing concern about a highly trained police canine breaking protocol, others touched by the obvious connection forming between dog and child. "That dog should be back on duty," an older man commented loudly. "We pay taxes for security, not feel-good moments." "Oh, hush," countered an elderly woman beside him. "That child is clearly ill, and the dog sensed it. Some things are more important than rules." Their exchange exemplified the division rapidly forming among the spectators. A small group of law enforcement supporters argued that allowing a working dog to deviate from training created dangerous precedents. A larger contingent defended Max's actions as a moment of necessary compassion. Smartphone videos were already being uploaded to social media platforms, commentary building with each share. Officer Carter found himself at the center of a situational whirlwind with no precedent in his training manual. Department policy was clear. Unauthorized civilian contact with canine officers was prohibited, and handlers were responsible for maintaining absolute control over their partners at all times. Max's independent decision to approach Tommy constituted a serious breach of protocol, one that could potentially end both their careers. Yet as Carter watched Tommy's face illuminate with joy during each moment of contact with Max, professional concerns receded in importance. Captain Thomas Davis, Carter's supervisor, pushed through the crowd, his expression severe. "Carter, what the hell is happening here?" he demanded in a harsh whisper. "Why is your canine engaging with civilians without authorization?" Officer Carter straightened to attention. "Sir, Max broke position without command. I was attempting to assess the situation before extraction." The explanation sounded hollow even to his own ears. Captain Davis glanced at Tommy, noting the service dog, the wheelchair, and the unmistakable signs of serious illness in the child's appearance. His stern expression faltered momentarily. "Get your partner back under control and resume the demonstration," he ordered. though with less conviction than his initial approach suggested. "We'll discuss this incident during debriefing." Carter nodded and turned toward Max, command phrase forming on his lips, when Tommy spoke again. "Your dog knew I was sad," the boy said simply, addressing Officer Carter with the directness only children truly master. "He came because I needed him. My dad always said police dogs were smart like that." The mention of Tommy's father, a fellow officer who had given his life in the line of duty, struck Carter with unexpected force. He remembered David Wilson, not as a statistic or a name on the memorial wall, but as a dedicated canine handler who had once argued passionately that working dogs required emotional intelligence alongside their tactical training. "Sometimes they understand what people need better than we do," Wilson had insisted during a training session, years before his death. The memory surfaced with clarity that suggested its significance had been waiting for this moment. Captain Davis had overheard Tommy's comment, and Carter observed a subtle shift in his superior's demeanor. The captain knelt to Tommy's eye level, his official sternness temporarily abandoned. "Your dad was Officer Wilson?" When Tommy nodded, Davis continued with unexpected gentleness. "He trained some of our best dogs. He would have been proud to see this." Rising, he added quietly to Carter, 5 minutes, then resume the demonstration." As Captain Davis withdrew, the crowd's attention shifted to a new development. Michael Reynolds had positioned himself directly in front of Tommy again, his aggressive photography continuing despite the warnings. "Just one more close-up," he insisted, leaning uncomfortably near Tommy's face. "Look sad again, kid. That got the most engagement on my last post." Scout growled, his patience for the intrusive human clearly exhausted. Max mirrored the service dog's protective posture, creating a united front that caused Michael to hesitate momentarily. Taking advantage of the pausing, Sarah stepped between the photographer and her son. "This has gone far enough," she stated firmly. "You've been asked repeatedly to stop harassing my son. Either move away voluntarily, or I'll request that Officer Carter remove you." Michael's expression darkened with sudden rage that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "You people always expect special treatment," he spat, his voice rising. "Just because your kid's in a wheelchair doesn't make him more important than everyone else here. I've got just as much right." "No, you don't," interrupted a woman who had been quietly observing. She stepped forward from the crowd, smartphone in hand. "I've recorded your behavior for the past 15 minutes, sir. You've touched a service animal without permission, used your equipment to physically intimidate a disabled child, and continued harassment after multiple requests to stop. Those are all actionable offenses." Michael turned his anger toward her. "Mind your own business, lady. You're not police." "No, but I am," said Officer Carter, who had been monitoring the escalation while remaining beside Max. "Sir, I need to see some identification and press credentials immediately." Michael's composure cracked visibly. He fumbled with his wallet, producing a press pass that Carter examined skeptically. "This is for a blog called Urban Expose," the officer noted. "Not exactly mainstream media." "I have 50,000 followers," Michael retorted defensively. "That's more reach than half the newspapers in this city." Carter returned the ID without comment and turned his attention back to Tommy and Max. The German Shepherd remained positioned protectively beside the wheelchair, his body language vigilant but calm. Scout had settled into a complementary position on Tommy's other side, creating a protective barrier that seemed to comfort the boy immensely. The crowd had begun to thin as other demonstrations around the park drew attention away, but a core group remained, watching the unusual scene with evident interest. Sarah Wilson used the momentary calm to address Officer Carter directly. "I don't want to get you in trouble," she said softly. "If Max needs to return to his duties, we understand." Carter hesitated, weighing professional obligation against the unmistakable rightness of the connection forming between his partner and Tommy Wilson. In 17 years of police work, he had adhered rigidly to regulations, believing that protocol existed for good reason. Yet something about this situation defied standard procedure. Max was not merely disobeying training, he was demonstrating a level of emotional intelligence that transcended it. 5 more minutes won't hurt, Carter finally decided, knowing that each additional moment of unauthorized civilian contact was adding to the eventual disciplinary consequences he would face. The gratitude in Tommy's eyes made the potential repercussions seem insignificant by comparison. A few feet away, Michael Reynolds had not abandoned his pursuit of the perfect shot. He circled the small group, continuously raising his camera despite the previous warnings. When he positioned himself directly behind Tommy's wheelchair, attempting to capture the boy's face in the same frame as Max, something unexpected occurred. Max lifted his head sharply, nostrils flaring as he processed scents undetectable to human senses. His body language shifted subtly, not toward greater alertness, but toward a focused assessment that Officer Carter recognized immediately from their narcotics detection work. The German Shepherd's attention was fixed not on Tommy now, but on Michael Reynolds. Carter observed the change with professional interest. Max had been trained to alert to specific substances, primarily narcotics and explosives, and his current behavior suggested detection rather than protection. Moving closer to his partner, Carter whispered a question too softly for others to hear. "What have you found, boy?" Max responded with a subtle ear movement that confirmed Carter's suspicion. Something about Michael Reynolds had triggered Max's detection instincts. Given the photographer's erratic behavior and disproportionate aggression, Carter's police experience suggested several possibilities, none of them innocent. The dynamic of the encounter shifted as Officer Carter began evaluating Michael, not merely as an annoying civilian, but as a potential person of interest. He maintained his outwardly casual demeanor while conducting a more thorough visual assessment of the photographer, noting the excessive perspiration, dilated pupils, and trembling hands that suggested potential substance influence. Tommy, remarkably perceptive despite his young age, noticed the change in Max's attention. "Is something wrong with your dog?" he asked Carter, genuine concern in his voice. "He looks like he's working now." "Max is always working," Carter explained, impressed by the boy's observation. "That's what makes him such a good police dog. Even when he seems relaxed, part of him is always on duty." Sarah checked her watch reluctantly. "Tommy, honey, we should probably let Officer Carter and Max get back to their demonstration. Other people are waiting to see them perform." Tommy nodded bravely, though disappointment shadowed his features. He gave Max's fur one final stroke before withdrawing his hand. "Thank you for visiting me," he told the dog solemnly. "You're even better than I imagined." Max responded by pressing his muzzle gently against Tommy's arm, a gesture so uncharacteristic of his usual professional detachment that Officer Carter found himself momentarily speechless. The connection between dog and child seemed to transcend the brief time they had spent together, suggesting a depth of understanding that defied conventional explanation. As Carter prepared to lead Max back to the demonstration area, he made a decision that directly contradicted department protocol, but felt irrefutably correct. Kneeling beside Tommy's wheelchair, he removed one of the special K9 unit patches from his uniform sleeve. "This is for you," he said, placing the embroidered emblem in Tommy's small hand. "It's what your dad would have worn when he worked with his partner. Max and I would be honored if you'd keep it." Tommy's eyes widened as he ran his fingers reverently over the threaded surface. "Really? I can have this?" "Really," Carter confirmed, aware that Captain Davis was watching the exchange from a distance, his expression unreadable. "And if your mom is okay with it, maybe you could come visit Max at the training center sometime. See how we work together." Sarah nodded wordlessly, too moved by the officer's kindness to form a coherent response. Tommy clutched the patch to his chest, as if it were made of precious metal rather than simple fabric. "I'll take good care of it," he promised solemnly. "Scout and I both will." As Officer Carter finally led Max back toward the demonstration area, the German Shepherd turned his head repeatedly, maintaining visual contact with Tommy until distance made it impossible. The connection established during those brief minutes seemed reluctant to break, stretching between dog and boy like an invisible thread of understanding. Captain Davis intercepted them before they reached the performance space. "That was way outside protocol, Carter," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Care to explain why one of my most disciplined handlers just violated about 15 regulations?" Carter met his superior's gaze directly. "With respect, sir, Max made a judgment call I couldn't override. The boy is Officer Wilson's son, and he's terminally ill. He paused, then added with quiet conviction, sometimes being human has to come before being a perfect officer. Davis held his gaze for a long moment before responding. Finish the demonstration. We'll discuss the appropriate response afterward. As he turned away, he added almost inaudibly, "Good call, James." Returning to the center of the demonstration area, Officer Carter reoriented himself to the waiting crowd. Their numbers had swelled during the unexpected interruption, word having spread through the park about the police dog who had broken training to comfort a sick child. Smartphones pointed from every direction, documenting Max's return to official duties after his extraordinary deviation. Carter cleared his throat and resumed his professional demeanor. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the brief delay. Max and I will now demonstrate advanced suspect apprehension techniques. As you've just witnessed, our canine officers are not only highly trained in police work, but also possess remarkable instincts regarding human needs. This balance of discipline and compassion makes them invaluable partners in serving our community." The crowd erupted in enthusiastic applause, their reaction suggesting that Max's compassionate break from protocol had enhanced rather than diminished their respect for the canine unit. As the demonstration resumed, Carter noticed Tommy and Sarah watching from their position at the edge of the area, the boy's face illuminated with joy that transcended his physical condition. What had begun as a simple exhibition had evolved into something far more meaningful, a moment of connection that would have consequences none of them could yet fully comprehend. The demonstration concluded to enthusiastic applause as Officer Carter and Max completed their final sequence. Throughout the performance, Max had executed every command with flawless precision, yet Carter noted his partner's occasional glances toward Tommy's wheelchair. The connection forged between the police dog and the boy seemed to transcend their brief interaction, creating a persistent awareness that influenced even Max's professional focus. As Carter led Max from the demonstration area, Captain Davis approached with a stern expression that suggested their earlier conversation was far from concluded. "Carter, my office trailer." "Now," the captain ordered, his voice pitched low enough to avoid public attention. "Bring the K9." He turned without waiting for acknowledgement and strode toward the temporary command center established for the community event. The walk across the park provided Carter with precious minutes to formulate his explanation. In 17 years of service, he had never deliberately violated protocol, yet he couldn't bring himself to regret Max's interaction with Tommy Wilson. Some instinct deeper than training had guided his partner's actions, and Carter's decision to allow it felt fundamentally right despite its professional consequences. Inside the cramped trailer that served as the event's command post, Captain Davis closed the door and gestured Carter toward a folding chair. Max settled at his handler's feet, alert but calm. The captain remained standing, his expression unreadable as he studied the veteran canine officer. "Do you understand the position you've put me in, Carter?" Davis finally asked, his tone more weary than angry. "We had the commissioner's office and 3 city council members in attendance today. All of them witnessed one of our elite canine units abandoning protocol to interact with a civilian, a direct violation of department regulations." Carter maintained respectful eye contact. "Yes, sir. I understand the breach of procedure and accept full responsibility for failing to immediately correct my partner's behavior." Davis's eyebrows rose slightly. "And yet, you not only allowed the interaction to continue, but actively facilitated it by remaining on scene and even giving department property to the civilian in question." "The K9 patch was my personal spare, sir, not department-issued equipment," Carter clarified, though he knew this technicality would provide little professional protection. "And yes, I made the decision to allow Max's interaction with Tommy Wilson to continue based on my assessment of the situation." "Which was?" Davis prompted, crossing his arms. Carter chose his words carefully. "That Max had detected something requiring his attention, something my human senses couldn't identify. In 17 years working with canines, I've learned to trust their instincts even when I don't immediately understand them." The captain's expression shifted subtly. "And now, after observation, what's your professional assessment of your partner's behavior?" Before Carter could formulate his response, a sharp knock interrupted their conversation. Without waiting for permission, Michael Reynolds burst into the trailer, his earlier belligerence replaced by agitation. "I want to file a complaint," he announced, glaring at Carter while keeping a wary distance from Max. "Your officer's dog interfered with my work and attempted to intimidate me. I demand compensation for the disruption to my professional activities." Captain Davis's expression hardened. "Sir, this is an official police area. You can file any complaints at the precinct during regular business hours." Michael didn't back down. "I'm not leaving until this is addressed. That dog singled me out for harassment after I was simply doing my job. This officer," he jabbed a finger toward Carter, "allowed his canine to threaten me while favoring that kid just because he's in a wheelchair. It's discrimination against working press." Max's posture changed subtly as Michael spoke, his attention focusing on the agitated man with the same alert assessment Carter had noticed earlier. The German Shepherd's nostrils flared repeatedly, processing information imperceptible to the humans in the room. "Sir, I need to see your press credentials again," Carter requested calmly, responding to his partner's behavioral cues. Michael produced the same blog identification with visible reluctance. "I told you already, I work for Urban Exposé. We're digital media, covering stories the mainstream press ignores." Captain Davis examined the credential with professional skepticism. "This isn't an NYPD-recognized press pass. What exactly is your interest in our canine demonstration, Mr. Reynolds?" "Human interest," Michael snapped. "People love seeing authority figures screw up. Your dog-breaking training to play with a sick kid is clickbait gold. My subscribers eat that stuff up." His callous characterization of Tommy's condition triggered an unexpected reaction from Carter. "The sick kid you're referring to is the son of Officer David Wilson, who died in the line of duty 3 years ago. His terminal diagnosis is the same condition that killed my younger brother last year." The revelation silenced the trailer momentarily. Carter hadn't intended to disclose this personal connection, had in fact compartmentalized his emotional response to Tommy's condition throughout their interaction. Yet Michael's dismissive attitude had breached his professional reserve, allowing the painful parallel to surface. Michael's expression flickered, something vulnerable briefly displacing his hostility before the defensive mask returned. "That's unfortunate, but irrelevant to my complaint. The dog targeted me specifically after I was just doing my job." "Max is trained to identify specific behaviors and substances," Carter explained, studying Michael with renewed professional interest. "His focus on you suggests he detected something warranting attention." Color drained from Michael's face. "That's ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong." Max had risen to his feet, attention locked on Michael with the focused intensity Carter recognized from their narcotics detection work. The German Shepherd took a deliberate step toward the photographer, who retreated until his back pressed against the trailer wall. "Call him off," Michael demanded, voice rising with evident panic. "This is police intimidation." Captain Davis observed the interaction with growing suspicion. "Mr. Reynolds, would you consent to a voluntary search of your person and equipment? It would resolve this situation immediately." "Absolutely not. I know my rights. You need probable cause or a warrant." Michael's hand moved protectively to his camera bag, the gesture triggering another step forward from Max. Carter recognized the subtle signals in his partner's body language. Max wasn't displaying aggression, but the intense focus of confirmed detection. "Sir, my canine partner is indicating the presence of contraband. That constitutes probable cause for a search under department guidelines." Michael's face contorted with a mixture of anger and fear. "This is a setup. You're targeting me because I saw what happened with the kid. I'm documenting police breaking their own rules." The confrontation might have escalated further had the trailer door not opened again, admitting a uniformed officer escorting Sarah Wilson. Tommy was visible through the open door, waiting in his wheelchair with Scout vigilant beside him. "Sorry to interrupt, Captain," the officer explained, "but Miss Wilson insists on speaking with you about the incident with her son." Sarah's expression registered surprise at finding Michael in the trailer, but she addressed Captain Davis directly. "I wanted to make sure Officer Carter isn't disciplined for allowing Max to interact with my son. Tommy's condition." Her voice faltered momentarily. Doesn't leave him many good days. What happened with your canine officer was the brightest moment he's had in months. Michael's demeanor underwent a startling transformation. The combative hostility drained from his posture, replaced by apparent recognition. He stared at Sarah with an intensity that drew everyone's attention. Wilson, he repeated, his voice barely audible. You said your name is Wilson, and your son has crab disease. Sarah's expression reflected confusion. Yes, how did you? Alex Reynolds, Michael interrupted, his voice cracking. My son, he died 14 months ago. Same diagnosis, he was 6. The revelation landed in the trailer like a physical weight. Carter felt his breath catch as the photographer's antagonistic behavior suddenly acquired painful context. Behind the aggressive facade lay the raw wound of a parallel tragedy. A father who had lost his child to the same condition, now claiming Tommy Wilson. I recognize the service dog's vest, Michael continued, addressing Sarah directly now. The purple trim with the silver embroidery. It's from the Pediatric Assistance Foundation. Alex had the same one for his dog. Sarah nodded slowly, comprehension dawning. The expedited training program for terminal cases, she confirmed quietly. They prioritize children with limited time. 6 months from diagnosis to the end, Michael said, his voice hollow with remembered pain. They told us he was special because he lasted that long. Special. The word emerged bitter and broken. Captain Davis and Carter exchanged glances, their professional suspicion transforming into uncomfortable witnessing of a deeply personal disclosure. Max, however, maintained his alert focus on Michael's camera bag, unswayed by the emotional currents now filling the small space. I'm so sorry about your son, Sarah said softly. Tommy was diagnosed 11 months ago. The doctors say. She stopped, unwilling to voice the prognosis in a room of strangers. They always give you estimates, Michael replied, a ghost of his earlier bitterness returning. Alex beat theirs by 8 weeks. Every morning I'd think, maybe the doctors are wrong, maybe he's the exception. But there are no exceptions with Crabbe, just different timetables for the same outcome. The raw honesty of his statement struck Carter with physical force. He had harbored those same desperate thoughts during his brother's illness. The irrational hope that medical statistics somehow wouldn't apply to their particular case. Michael's articulation of this universal reaction to terminal diagnosis made his earlier behavior simultaneously more comprehensible and more tragic. Yet Max's continued alertness prevented Carter from fully surrendering to sympathy. His professional instincts remained engaged despite the emotional revelation. Mr. Reynolds, he said carefully, my partner is still indicating contraband in your possession. We need to resolve that issue regardless of other circumstances. Michael's expression hardened momentarily before crumpling into resignation. Without speaking, he unzipped his camera bag and removed a small prescription bottle, placing it on the trailer's small desk. Oxycodone, he admitted quietly. From Alex's final weeks, the doctors prescribed more than he needed before. He couldn't complete the sentence. Sometimes the memories get too heavy. I promised my wife I'd stop, but today marks 14 months since we lost him. Captain Davis examined the prescription bottle, noting the label confirmed Michael's explanation. This medication isn't prescribed to you, Mr. Reynolds. Possession constitutes a felony offense. I know, Michael acknowledged flatly. Charge me if you have to. Nothing matters much anyway. The response reflected a desolation Carter recognized from his own grief journey. The hollow indifference to consequences that follows devastating loss. His professional obligation demanded reporting the illegal possession, yet compassion made this textbook response feel inadequate to the complex human situation before him. Before anyone could respond, a commotion outside the trailer drew their attention. Tommy's voice called out in distress, followed by Scout's sharp bark of alarm. Sarah rushed to the door, Carter and Max immediately behind her. Tommy was slumped in his wheelchair, his small body racked by violent tremors. Scout circled anxiously, barking the specific alert pattern he had been trained to give before seizure events. Several bystanders had gathered, their expressions reflecting helpless concern. It's coming too fast, Sarah gasped, fumbling in her bag for medication. The rescue medicine needs 15 minutes to work. He's already seizing. The medical emergency transformed the dynamics instantly. Captain Davis was already radioing for paramedics, while Carter knelt beside the convulsing child. Max pressed forward without command, positioning himself against Tommy's wheelchair with a steadiness that provided physical support as the boy's body shook. Most surprising was Michael's response. The grieving father pushed through the gathering crowd with authority, born of terrible experience. "Cushion his head," he directed Sarah calmly. "Turn him on his side if you can." The wheelchair makes it harder. Together, they managed to stabilize Tommy's position while the seizure ran its course. Michael retrieved a small oxygen tank from Sarah's bag with the practiced efficiency of someone intimately familiar with the equipment. Alex had the same setup, he explained, adjusting the flow rate with confidence. The supplemental oxygen helps with the post-seizure confusion. Throughout the crisis, Max remained pressed firmly against Tommy's wheelchair, his body providing a stable counterbalance to the seizure's violent movements. Scout maintained his alert barking until the episode began to subside, then shifted to gentle whines that seemed to monitor Tommy's returning awareness. As the boy's tremors gradually diminished, his eyelids fluttered open. Confusion clouded his expression until he registered Max's presence against his chair. A weak smile formed on his pale lips as he reached a trembling hand toward the police dog. "You came back," Tommy whispered, his voice fragile in the aftermath of the seizure. At that moment, distant sirens announced the approaching paramedics. Captain Davis moved efficiently to clear a path while Sarah monitored her son's vital signs with the hypervigilance of a parent accustomed to medical crises. Michael stood slightly apart now, his earlier antagonism replaced by the haunted expression of someone reliving personal tragedy through another's suffering. Carter observed the remarkable scene with growing clarity. Max had not broken training on a whim or through failure of discipline. Somehow, the German Shepherd had detected Tommy's impending medical crisis before any human observer, including the boy's own mother and service dog. The timing of Max's initial approach to Tommy, which had seemed like an unprecedented breach of protocol, now appeared in a different light, as a preemptive response to a medical emergency, only detectable through the extraordinary sensory capabilities of a highly trained working dog. As paramedics arrived to stabilize Tommy for transport, Officer Carter made a decision that would alter the trajectory of multiple lives. "Captain," he said quietly, "I believe Max detected the chemical changes preceding Tommy's seizure." His approach wasn't a protocol breach. It was an alert response consistent with his training, just not one we've specifically conditioned. Davis studied the canine officer thoughtfully. "That's a significant claim, Carter. It would require documentation and verification through medical services." "I understand, sir. I'm prepared to document my observations and Max's behavior patterns for review." Carter hesitated before adding, "And I'd like permission to explore the possibility of additional training protocols. If Max can detect pre-seizure indicators, it could have implications beyond police work." As the paramedics prepared to transport Tommy, Sarah approached Officer Carter. "He's asking for Max," she said, her voice reflecting both gratitude and concern. "I know it's against regulations, but—" "Not if it's a medical assistance response," Carter interrupted gently. "With Captain Davis's permission, Max and I will follow you to the hospital. We may need to document your son's condition for an official report." Davis nodded almost imperceptibly. Tacit approval for Carter's unorthodox proposal. "I'll expect comprehensive documentation, officer. This could establish important precedent." Michael Reynolds had retreated to the perimeter of the activity, his earlier combative presence diminished by the medical emergency and his own painful revelations. As Carter prepared to follow the ambulance, he approached the photographer with professional caution, tempered by new understanding. "Mr. Reynolds," he began formally, "regarding the prescription medication." He paused, weighing duty against compassion. "I'd strongly recommend connecting with the department's grief support services. They have resources specifically for parents who've lost children. The contact information will be in my card." He extended his business card, on which he'd written the additional number. Michael accepted the card silently, the simple gesture acknowledging both the professional courtesy being extended and the personal connection forged through shared understanding of loss. "The boy," he said finally, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Will he? Medical privacy prevents me from discussing another family's situation, Carter responded gently. But I believe Max will be able to help him in ways we're just beginning to understand. As the ambulance departed with Tommy and Sarah inside, Carter led Max toward their patrol vehicle. The events of the day had upended his professional expectations and challenged departmental protocols. Yet the emerging purpose behind Max's extraordinary behavior suggested possibilities that transcended conventional canine deployment. Something profound had occurred, a convergence of human suffering, canine capabilities, and compassionate response that might ultimately redefine the boundaries between working animals and the humans they served. The pediatric wing of Mount Sinai Hospital maintained a carefully cultivated cheerfulness that stood in stark contrast to its purpose. Bright murals of cartoon animals adorned walls that had witnessed countless heartbreaks, and colorful mobiles hung from ceilings that had reflected the tearful prayers of generations of parents. Officer James Carter found the forced optimism almost unbearable as he followed a nurse toward Tommy Wilson's room, Max walking at perfect heel position beside him. 3 days had passed since the seizure at Central Park. Through careful negotiation with hospital administration and Captain Davis's official endorsement, Carter had secured permission for Max to visit Tommy in a professional capacity. The documentation classified their visits as exploratory research into potential medical detection capabilities, a bureaucratic designation that satisfied both department regulations and hospital policy. Outside room 412, Sarah Wilson stood speaking with Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, Tommy's neurologist. The shadows beneath Sarah's eyes had deepened since the incident at the park, and her shoulders curved forward as if bearing physical weight. When she noticed Carter and Max approaching, her expression brightened momentarily. He's been asking for Max every hour, she said by way of greeting. This is the first day he's been alert enough for visitors. Dr. Morgan extended her hand to Carter. Officer Carter? I'm Dr. Morgan. Thank you for coming. I've reviewed your report about the incident. It's quite remarkable that your canine partner appeared to detect Tommy's seizure before onset. Max has surprised me throughout our partnership, Carter acknowledged, but never quite like this. Is Tommy stable enough for a visit? The doctor's expression grew guarded. Stable is a relative term with Krabbe disease. The seizure at the park was more severe than his previous episodes, and we're seeing acceleration in several concerning markers. She lowered her voice. May I speak frankly, officer? Carter nodded, instinctively resting his hand on Max's head. Tommy's condition has deteriorated significantly. We've adjusted his medication, but the progression rate has exceeded our projections. Originally, we estimated 6 to 8 months before. She glanced at Sarah, who had stepped away to speak with a nurse. Now we're looking at weeks, possibly less. The stark prognosis struck Carter with physical force. In his mind flashed images of his brother's final decline, the accelerating loss of function, the increasing reliance on medication, the terrible moment when hope transformed from possibility to delusion. He had recognized the signs in Tommy's condition, but had allowed himself to believe the boy's case might follow a different trajectory. Does his mother know? Carter asked quietly. Dr. Morgan nodded. We discussed it this morning. She's been remarkably strong, but... The doctor's professional composure wavered briefly. She's a single parent with limited resources. The medical expenses alone would be overwhelming for a 2-income household. Sarah has been working 3 jobs while managing Tommy's care. What about insurance? Carter asked. Surely there's coverage for catastrophic illness. Their policy has a lifetime maximum benefit that they reached 4 months ago, Dr. Morgan explained. Sarah sold their house to cover the subsequent treatments. Now she's renting a small apartment that isn't properly equipped for Tommy's needs. The landlord has been threatening eviction because of complaints about Scout's barking during seizure alerts. The cascade of hardships seemed brutally excessive. A family that had already lost a father in the line of duty now facing financial ruin alongside their devastating medical reality. Carter thought of his own brother's illness, how it had drained their family's resources despite having comprehensive insurance and multiple income sources. Sarah returned, her brief conversation with the nurse having restored some of her composure. "Tommy's awake now," she said. "He's very excited about Max's visit." Carter followed her into the hospital room, where Tommy lay amid a constellation of monitoring equipment. The contrast between the institutional machinery and the child's Superman pajamas created a visual discord that intensified the room's emotional weight. Scout lay curled at the foot of the bed, his alert posture relaxing slightly when he recognized Max. Tommy's face lit up when he saw the police dog. "Max, you came!" His voice was weaker than Carter remembered, but the enthusiasm remained undimmed. "Mom said you might visit, but I wasn't sure if police dogs were allowed in hospitals. Max has a special work permit," Carter explained, guiding his partner to the bedside. "And he's been very worried about you." "Really?" Tommy asked, eyes widening. "Police dogs worry about people?" "The good ones do," Carter confirmed, carefully monitoring Max's interaction with the medical equipment. The German Shepherd approached Tommy's bed with the same deliberate gentleness he had demonstrated at the park, positioning himself where the boy could reach him without straining. As Tommy stroked Max's fur with transparent delight, Carter noticed a display board on the wall behind the bed. A crude calendar had been drawn in colorful markers, with several dates circled in red. Last chemo was written on one date, and home again on another. Most striking was the notation, 2 weeks ahead, labeled Police Academy Tour in excited capital letters and surrounded by hand-drawn stars. Sarah followed his gaze. "The department offers tours for children with serious illnesses," she explained quietly. "Tommy's been talking about it for months. It was his big goal, to be well enough to see where his dad worked." Carter felt his throat tighten. The timing of the planned tour aligned precisely with Dr. Tapp Morgan's revised prognosis. Tommy might not live to experience it. "Officer Carter?" Tommy's voice pulled him back to the moment. "Could I ask you something important?" "Of course," Carter replied, moving closer to the bed. "Is Max happy being a police dog? Does he ever get scared?" The questions reflected a depth of empathy remarkable in a child so young, particularly one facing his own profound challenges. Carter considered his response carefully. "I think Max is happiest when he's helping people," he said finally. "Working dogs are different from pet dogs. They need purpose, a job that uses their special abilities. And yes, I'm sure he gets scared sometimes, but he's trained to be brave even when he's afraid." Tommy nodded solemnly. "That's what my dad said about his dog. That being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what you need to do anyway." "Your dad was right," Carter affirmed, unexpectedly moved by the wisdom David Wilson had imparted to his son. "That's what makes a good police officer, and a good police dog." Tommy's eyes drifted to the ceiling, his expression suddenly distant. "Dr. Morgan thinks I'm going to die soon," he said matter-of-factly. "I heard her telling Mom when they thought I was asleep." Sarah made a small pained sound. Carter glanced at her helplessly, unprepared for Tommy's directness. "I'm not scared for me," Tommy continued, "but I'm scared for Mom. When I go to heaven with Dad, she'll be all alone except for Scout." His gaze returned to Max, who remained steadfast beside the bed. "Will you still visit her sometimes, so she's not so lonely?" The simple request, childlike in its conception, yet profound in its compassion, momentarily robbed Carter of speech. Max, perhaps sensing the emotional currents in the room, pressed closer to Tommy's bed, his warm brown eyes fixed on the boy's face with singular attention. "I promise," Carter managed finally, his professional detachment crumbling under the weight of Tommy's selfless concern. A nurse entered, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. "Time for medication, buddy," she announced cheerfully, though her eyes reflected awareness of the room's emotional atmosphere. "Your visitor may need to step out for a bit." "Can Max stay?" Tommy asked immediately. "He helps me feel stronger." The nurse hesitated, glancing at the various tubes and medical devices. "If your mom and Officer Carter think it's okay, I suppose a few more minutes wouldn't hurt." As the nurse administered Tommy's medication, Carter stepped into the hallway to compose himself. Captain Davis was waiting, his official demeanor at odds with the pediatric surroundings. "How is he?" Davis asked without preamble. "Failing," Carter replied bluntly. "The doctors have revised their timeline. Weeks instead of months." Davis nodded, absorbing the information with the stoicism of a career officer who had witnessed many tragedies. I received the preliminary report from the department psychologist regarding your proposal. She's intrigued by Max's apparent detection abilities, but concerned about resource allocation. Using a fully trained police canine for medical support work represents a significant departmental investment. The bureaucratic assessment struck Carter as obscenely irrelevant in light of Tommy's deteriorating condition. With respect, sir, we're talking about giving comfort to a dying child, the son of a fallen officer. I understand the emotional components, Carter, but department policy is clear. Canine resources are allocated based on public safety priorities, not individual cases, however compelling. Davis's expression softened slightly. The committee has concerns about your personal involvement as well. Your brother's similar diagnosis creates a conflict of interest that could impact your judgment regarding appropriate canine deployment. Carter struggled to maintain professional composure. My personal experience gives me insight, not bias. Max detected Tommy's seizure before any human observer, including his mother and service dog. That's not emotional projection. It's observable fact with potential applications beyond this individual case. The committee will require additional documentation and controlled testing before considering protocol modifications, Davis replied. In the meantime, Max remains assigned to standard canine duties. Any further hospital visits must be on your personal time and clearly documented as unofficial. The captain's ruling, though not unexpected, felt like a betrayal of both Tommy's needs and Max's demonstrated capabilities. Carter had hoped the department would recognize the potential value in Max's apparent seizure detection abilities, not merely for Tommy Wilson, but for future applications that could benefit others with similar conditions. Understood, sir, he replied stiffly. As Davis departed, Sarah emerged from Tommy's room, her expression reflecting both gratitude and bone-deep wariness. He's asking for you, she said quietly. The medication makes him drowsy, but he wants to say goodbye to Max before he falls asleep. Carter followed her back into the room, where Tommy was fighting to keep his eyes open. Thank you for bringing Max, the boy murmured, his words slightly slurred from the medication. He's the best police dog ever. He thinks you're pretty special too, Carter replied, guiding Max closer so Tommy could touch him one more time. We'll come back soon. As they left the hospital, the contrasting realities of Tommy's situation weighed heavily on Carter. The boy's courage in facing his mortality, his concern for his mother's future loneliness, and the bureaucratic obstacles to providing even small comforts during his final weeks created a perfect storm of frustration and resolve. Departmental regulations and resource allocation protocols suddenly seemed hollow when measured against the simple human need for compassion at life's end. Max walked silently beside his handler, occasionally glancing up as if sensing the emotional turmoil behind Carter's professional facade. The German Shepherd had demonstrated capabilities beyond his training, perhaps beyond human understanding, yet was constrained by institutional structures unable to accommodate such exceptional circumstances. As they reached the patrol vehicle, Carter made a decision that would challenge his career-long adherence to protocol. Some rules, he concluded, were meant to be broken when compassion demanded it. The consequences to his professional standing seemed insignificant compared to the opportunity to bring comfort to a dying child and his grieving mother. Whatever disciplinary action might follow, Carter knew with absolute certainty that Max belonged at Tommy's side during the difficult days ahead. The precinct conference room fell silent as Officer Carter concluded his presentation. For the past hour, he had methodically detailed Max's apparent ability to detect pre-seizure indicators in Tommy Wilson, supported by hospital data, witness statements, and his own professional observations. Captain Davis sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, as he studied the documentation Carter had compiled. Beside him, Dr. Elizabeth Morgan had contributed medical context, explaining the biochemical changes that precede seizure events in patients with Krabbe disease. To summarize, Carter said, indicating the charts projected on the screen, Max demonstrated atypical alert behavior approximately 7 minutes before Tommy's visible seizure onset. This timeframe correlates with the preliminary chemical changes Dr. Morgan has identified in Tommy's blood work from that day. We've documented 3 subsequent incidents where Max demonstrated similar pre-alert behaviors during our hospital visits, each confirmed by medical monitoring equipment. Dr. Morgan nodded. The data is compelling. Tommy's EEG showed abnormal activity precisely when Officer Carter noted changes in the canine's behavior. While we need more controlled studies for scientific validation, the correlation is too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Captain Davis removed his reading glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Carter, your dedication to this case is commendable, but it crosses professional boundaries. Your brother's death from the same condition is precisely why I recognized what was happening, Carter interrupted, breaking protocol by challenging his superior directly. Sir, with respect, my personal experience doesn't invalidate my professional observations. It enhanced my ability to identify patterns others might have missed. The captain's expression hardened at the interruption, but before he could respond, the conference room door opened. Michael Reynolds entered, accompanied by a woman Carter didn't recognize. The transformation in Michael's appearance was striking. His aggressive demeanor replaced by subdued professionalism, his clothing conservative rather than the rumpled attire he'd worn at the park. Sorry we're late, Michael said, addressing Captain Davis. Traffic from the Times building was worse than expected. Davis nodded. Officer Carter, this is Christina Liu, investigative health reporter for the New York Times. Mr. Reynolds has been working with her team for the past 6 months. Carter stared at Michael in confusion. Working with the Times? I thought you ran a blog called Urban Exposé. Michael exchanged glances with Christina, who took the lead in explaining. Urban Exposé is a digital cover for a long-term investigation into medical response protocols across city agencies. Michael has been working undercover, documenting how first responders and police handle citizens with serious medical conditions. You're an actual journalist? Carter asked incredulously, struggling to reconcile this information with the antagonistic photographer who had harassed Tommy and Sarah at the park. Investigative reporter, 15 years experience, Michael confirmed quietly. My behavior at the park was partly professional methodology and partly personal breakdown. The anniversary of my son's death hit me harder than I expected. Christina continued, Michael's personal experience with Krabbe disease made him uniquely qualified for this segment of our investigation. We've been documenting how emergency services respond to citizens with neurological conditions, particularly children. So the harassment, the aggressive behavior, that was all an act. Carter felt a surge of anger at the manipulation, especially given Tommy's vulnerable condition. Michael's expression reflected genuine remorse. The methodology was planned, creating a minor disturbance to document response patterns. The intensity was not. He hesitated, seeming to struggle with his next words. When I saw Tommy in that wheelchair with his service dog, he looked so much like Alex in his final months. Something in me broke. I went too far, pushed too hard. I'm not proud of that moment. Captain Davis intervened. Mr. Reynolds has provided his notes and recordings to the department as part of our agreement with the Times. Their investigation has identified significant gaps in our training protocols regarding citizens with neurological disorders. Which brings us to why we're here today, Christina added, placing a folder on the conference table. What happened with your canine partner and Tommy Wilson potentially represents a groundbreaking development in service animal capabilities. The Times would like to document Max's apparent seizure detection abilities as part of our series on innovations in medical response. Carter felt increasingly disoriented by these revelations. The narrative he had constructed, of a belligerent photographer harassing a sick child, had been upended by the disclosure of a sophisticated journalistic investigation with potential public benefit. Yet his protective instinct toward Tommy remained unchanged. Tommy isn't a test subject, he stated firmly. He's a critically ill child with limited time. I won't allow his final weeks to become a media spectacle. Neither would I, Michael responded with unexpected firmness. My son died in the glare of cameras and clinical observation. I wouldn't inflict that on another family. He opened the folder Christina had placed on the table, revealing a formal proposal. What we're suggesting is a controlled study of Max's capabilities, conducted in partnership with Mount Sinai's Pediatric Neurology Department, with Tommy's participation only as he and his mother are comfortable with. Dr. Morgan, who had remained silent during these revelations, leaned forward with evident interest. Such a study could potentially validate what we're observing anecdotally. If a trained canine can reliably detect pre-seizure biochemical changes, it could lead to earlier intervention protocols. And funding? Christina added pointedly. The Times investigation has uncovered concerning patterns in how medical research prioritizes certain conditions over others. Rare pediatric neurological disorders like Krabbe disease receive disproportionately low research funding despite their devastating impact. Captain Davis turned to Carter. Your partner's apparent capabilities have implications beyond this individual case. The department is prepared to temporarily reassign Max to a special research detail if the medical team determines his seizure detection abilities are consistent and reproducible. Carter struggled to process these rapid developments. The institutional resistance he had anticipated was instead transforming into cautious support. Yet he remained wary of Tommy becoming a research subject rather than a child deserving compassion. What about Tommy's immediate needs? He asked. The hospital visits, the upcoming police academy tour he's been looking forward to? That's the other reason I'm here, Michael said, his professional demeanor softening. After Alex died, my wife and I established a foundation in his memory. We provide practical support for families affected by Krabbe disease, medical equipment, accessibility modifications, respite care. He paused, visibly emotional. When I recognized Tommy's condition at the park, I should have offered help immediately instead of what I did. I'd like to make that right. The revelation of these interwoven connections, Michael's personal loss, his professional investigation, and the existence of resources that could directly benefit Tommy and Sarah, created a momentary silence in the conference room. Carter felt the carefully constructed narrative of adversaries and allies dissolving, replaced by a more complex reality of shared grief and potential collaboration. Dr. Morgan broke the silence. There's something else you should know, Officer Carter. Something we discovered during Tommy's recent tests. She hesitated, glancing at Captain Davis, who nodded for her to continue. Tommy's genetic profile shows a variation we've only recently identified in Krabbe research. It's associated with a form of the disease that progresses in waves rather than linearly. His current decline may stabilize rather than continue accelerating. What does that mean exactly? Carter asked, hardly daring to hope. It means our timeline may be wrong, Dr. Morgan explained cautiously. With aggressive symptom management and the new enzyme therapy Tommy started last week, he might have months rather than weeks, possibly even a year or more. The possibility of extended time, however qualified and uncertain, landed like unexpected grace in the midst of preparation for imminent loss. Carter thought of Tommy's calendar with its hopeful markings of future events, including the police academy tour that had seemed tragically unattainable. There's one more thing, Captain Davis said, his official tone softening slightly. During our review of this situation, we examined Officer David Wilson's personnel records. Carter, did you know you worked with Wilson during your early years in the department? Carter shook his head, surprised. We may have crossed paths, but I don't recall a specific connection. Davis slid a photograph across the table, a training class from 12 years earlier, with Carter clearly visible among the new canine handlers. Beside him stood a younger David Wilson, both officers smiling at the camera with their rookie canine partners. You were in the same canine training cohort, Davis explained. Wilson was reassigned to patrol shortly afterward, but according to his service record, he specifically requested you as backup during a domestic violence call in 2014. His commendation letter mentions your canine work as exemplary. The unexpected connection between himself and Tommy's father struck Carter with emotional force. The photograph provided tangible evidence of a relationship he had no memory of, yet which created an unseen thread linking him to the Wilson family long before Max's extraordinary behavior at the park. Michael studied the photograph with evident emotion. Nothing happens in isolation, he said quietly. Alex used to tell me that was his favorite part of science class. How everything connects in ways we don't always see. As the meeting concluded and plans were formalized for the medical study, Carter found himself reconsidering his understanding of both recent events and his own professional journey. What had appeared as random chance, Max breaking training to approach Tommy, his apparent detection of pre-seizure indicators, now seemed part of a more complex pattern of connections and capabilities that transcended simple explanation. The path forward remained uncertain, filled with both potential breakthroughs and inevitable heartbreak. Yet the convergence of these unlikely allies offered something precious in the face of Tommy's condition. Not false hope, but purposeful engagement with possibilities that honored both the limits of current medical understanding and the unexpected capacities of a remarkable canine officer who had broken protocol to follow instincts deeper than training. 6 months after Max's unprecedented breach of protocol at Central Park, the NYPD held a special ceremony in the headquarters atrium. The usually austere space had been transformed with rows of chairs facing a small podium adorned with the department's insignia. Among the assembled guests were uniformed officers, medical professionals, journalists, and families connected to the Pediatric Neurological Support Initiative, a new program jointly sponsored by the Police Department, Mount Sinai Hospital, and the Alex Reynolds Foundation. At the center of the front row sat Tommy Wilson in his wheelchair, noticeably stronger than he had been during those critical days following the seizure event. Beside him, Scout maintained his vigilant service position, the dog's vest newly emblazoned with a specialized patch identifying him as part of the medical detection training program. Sarah Wilson sat next to her son, her expression reflecting the complex mixture of ongoing concern and cautious optimism that had become her daily companion. The experimental enzyme therapy had stabilized Tommy's condition beyond initial expectations, granting precious additional months that the family treasured without taking for granted. Commissioner Patricia Reeves approached the podium, surveying the gathered assembly with measured appreciation. Today marks the formal inauguration of a program that began, like many innovations in public service, with an unexpected moment of human connection, she began. The Specialized Canine Detection Unit represents a significant evolution in how our department serves citizens with medical vulnerabilities. It also reminds us that sometimes our most valuable insights come not from policy manuals, but from the extraordinary instincts of our partners, both human and canine. She gestured toward Officer James Carter and Max, who stood at parade rest near the side of the podium. The German Shepherd's posture reflected his impeccable training. Yet observers familiar with his story noted the subtle differences in his specialized equipment, the modified vest that identified him as both a police canine and a certified medical alert animal. The Police Commissioner's Excellence in Innovation Award is not bestowed lightly, Commissioner Reeves continued. In fact, this is only the 3rd time in department history that this recognition has been granted. Today, we honor Officer James Carter for his persistence in recognizing and documenting capabilities that might otherwise have been dismissed as coincidence or anthropomorphization. Carter stepped forward to accept the commendation, Max moving in perfect synchronization beside him. The journey to this moment had been neither simple nor straightforward. The initial medical study had expanded into a comprehensive research project involving 12 canine teams and 24 patients with various seizure disorders. Max's apparent sensitivity to pre-seizure biochemical changes had proven consistent and reproducible, leading to specialized training protocols that were now being implemented in departments across 3 states. Officer Carter's willingness to advocate for new applications of canine capabilities, even when it meant challenging established protocols, exemplifies the innovative thinking our department strives to encourage, the Commissioner concluded, presenting Carter with the formal certificate and medal. Carter accepted the honor with characteristic professionalism, though those who knew him well could detect the emotion beneath his composed exterior. "This recognition belongs not to me, but to Max," he said simply, "and to Tommy Wilson, whose courage continues to inspire everyone involved in this initiative." At the mention of his name, Tommy beamed with pride. The past 6 months had transformed his relationship with the department from a child's distant admiration to active participation. The police academy tour, once merely a hopeful notation on his calendar, had evolved into regular visits where Tommy provided the perfect testing subjects as developing medical alert skills. Though his condition remained serious, the specialized monitoring provided by both Max and the medical team had significantly reduced the impact of seizure events through earlier intervention. The ceremony continued with remarks from Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, who detailed the medical implications of the program. What began as an anomalous observation has developed into a rigorous protocol with measurable benefits for patients, she explained. The ability to detect seizures 7 to 10 minutes before clinical onset represents a critical window for intervention. In Tommy's case, this advance warning has reduced emergency room visits by 68% and significantly improved his quality of life. Michael Reynolds spoke next, his professional journalist's composure occasionally wavering as he described the Alex Reynolds Foundation's involvement. "When my son died, I believed his suffering had no purpose, that it was merely random cruelty in an indifferent universe," he admitted candidly. The partnership we celebrate today suggests otherwise. From Alex to Tommy to future children we haven't yet met, there's a thread of connection and purpose that transcends individual tragedy. The Foundation's contribution had been substantial, not only funding for the research program, but practical support for the Wilson family. Sarah had been able to reduce her work schedule to focus on Tommy's care. Their apartment had been modified with specialized equipment, and a network of support services now ensured they didn't face their challenges alone. Following the formal presentations, Captain Davis introduced the most anticipated portion of the ceremony, a demonstration of the medical alert capabilities now formally incorporated into specialized canine training. Tommy rolled his wheelchair to the demonstration area, accompanied by Carter and Max. The audience watched with rapt attention as they executed a series of carefully choreographed interactions demonstrating how the alert system functioned. "Max now has 2 distinct alert patterns," Carter explained to the audience. "His police work alerts for narcotics or explosives remain unchanged. But he's also been trained to recognize the specific biochemical signature that precedes Tommy's seizures." He guided Max through several examples, the German Shepherd demonstrating the distinct behavioral pattern that signaled medical alert versus police work. The most moving moment came not during the planned demonstration, but immediately afterward, when Tommy pulled a small box from his backpack. "Officer Carter and Commissioner Reeves said I could present this myself," he announced, his voice stronger than it had been in months. From the box, Tommy withdrew a specially designed K9 unit patch, distinct from the standard department issue. "This is for the new medical alert K9 unit," he explained proudly. "I helped design it. See, it has the police star, but also the medical alert symbol." Commissioner Reeves stepped forward. "The department has officially approved this insignia for all canine officers participating in the medical alert program. And Tommy Wilson has been named Honorary Junior Canine Officer in recognition of his essential contribution to the initiative." The audience's applause was spontaneous and genuine as Tommy carefully attached the new patch to Max's vest. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still during the procedure, his disciplined training evident in every aspect his bearing. Yet those closest to the pair noted the gentle wag of his tail when Tommy completed the task, a small breach of perfect protocol that symbolized the balance between discipline and compassion at the heart of the new program. As the ceremony concluded and attendees mingled during the reception, Sarah Wilson found a moment of relative privacy with Officer Carter. "I never properly thanked you," she said quietly. "Not just for what Max has done for Tommy medically, but for giving him purpose during this time. The days he spends at the training center, happiest." Carter acknowledged her gratitude with characteristic reserve. "Max chose Tommy," he reminded her. "I just had the sense to pay attention to what my partner was telling me." He hesitated before adding, "Your husband would be proud of the work Tommy's doing with the program. He's helping other kids like him, creating a legacy that will continue beyond any of us." Across the room, Tommy had become the center of an impromptu gathering of officers, medical staff, and fellow patients enrolled in the program. The boy who had once watched police dogs from a distance was now animatedly explaining alert patterns to newcomers. His expertise hard-earned through hundreds of hours of participation in the developing protocols. Michael Reynolds observed the scene with journalist detachment tempered by personal investment. "I'm publishing the full series next month," he informed Carter, who had joined him at the periphery of the reception. 6 articles on how emergency services are evolving to meet the needs of chronically ill citizens. The K9 program will be the centerpiece. "Will it help?" Carter asked simply. "Other departments, other families, will it make a difference?" "It already has," Michael replied, nodding toward where Tommy sat, surrounded by attentive listeners. "Not just the medical protocols, though those are significant, but this." He gestured to encompass the gathering, the recognition that our most vulnerable citizens deserve our highest level of service, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. That's the real innovation here. The afternoon concluded with a final, unscheduled moment that would later be described in Michael's article as emblematic of the program's spirit. As attendees prepared to depart, Max, still the consummate professional K9 officer, approached Tommy's wheelchair without command. The German Shepherd placed his paw precisely on the chair's armrest, exactly as he had done during their first encounter at Central Park. Tommy responded by leaning forward to whisper something in the dog's ear. A private communication between partners that needed no human interpretation. Whatever words passed between boy and dog remained their secret. But the photograph of that moment, featured prominently in the New York Times coverage the following week, captured perfectly the connection that had catalyzed institutional change. The NYPD Medical Alert K9 program would go on to receive national recognition, with departments across the country implementing similar initiatives. Officer James Carter would eventually be promoted to head the specialized unit, overseeing the training of dozens of K9 teams in dual-purpose detection work. Tommy Wilson would continue to defy medical expectations, his condition stabilizing sufficiently to allow participation in the program's development for 18 months before his eventual peaceful passing, surrounded by his mother, Scout, and his honorary K9 colleagues. Yet, for those who witnessed its origins, the program's most profound success was not measured in institutional accolades or policy changes, but in the simple reality of a bond formed between a disciplined working dog and a courageous child. A connection that reminded everyone involved that sometimes the most rigorous training must yield to the deeper wisdom of compassion. In a world that often prioritizes rules over compassion, sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from breaking protocol. As we age, we understand that life's most meaningful moments rarely follow a script. Tommy and Max's story reminds us that connections transcend boundaries, between species, between institutions, between strangers brought together by circumstance. For those of us who've experienced loss, watched loved ones suffer, or felt the weight of medical challenges, this story resonates deeply. It speaks to our need for dignity and vulnerability, and our hope that systems built to protect us will also see us as human beings, not just cases to manage. The bonds that formed between a disciplined K9 officer and a courageous child remind us that even in our darkest moments, unexpected grace can appear. Like Max sensing what others couldn't detect, sometimes the wisdom of compassion outranks the rigidity of rules. As we navigate our own challenges, may we remember that our most valuable legacy isn't in perfect adherence to protocol, but in those moments when we choose connection over convention, when we recognize suffering and respond with our full humanity. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.